Funding for the Hinckley Report is made possible in part by the George S. and Dolores Doré Eccles Foundation and the Cleone Peterson Eccles Endowment Fund.
Tonight on the Hinckley Report, a new revelation impacts the confirmation hearings of Brett Kavanaugh. How is Utah's delegation reacting? What consequences could this have on the Supreme Court and the midterm elections? The race for Utah's congressional seats are heating up, and some are going negative. How are Utahns reacting? Will a blue wave crash in Utah? And how have candidates weighed in on the medical marijuana debate? Good evening, and welcome to the Hinckley Report. I'm Jason Perry, director of the Hinckley Institute of Politics. Covering the week, Rod Arquette, host of the Rod Arquette Show on KNRS, Emily Clark, anchor with ABC4 Utah, and Max Roth, anchor and political reporter with Fox 13 News. So glad to have you all here today.
Thank you.
Always so many things happening in politics. Let's talk about a national issue that has very local interest, and that is our Supreme Court nominee. We know during the last presidential election, this was a topic that was so interesting to Utahns. Judge Kavanaugh was put forward. People thought he's the kind of conservative candidate they want. But a lot's happened since then. Rod, let's start with you. Christine Blasey Ford has come forward saying that he was a participant with two people that may have sexually assaulted her in high school. And that has been a story that many people are talking about, which we think we should address because it's going to have some implications. Talk about what those might be and a little bit about how our elected officials are really tackling this issue.
Well, I think there are a couple of questions here. We've got to get the facts, and hopefully we'll get to the facts whenever the Senate confirmation hearings continue. I mean, you need to know the facts. But I think we're at a critical point in the country's history when it comes to the presumption of innocence here. I mean, are we having a different standard when it comes to sexual assault or sexual harassment that a person is believed to be guilty until proven innocent? Now, it's the other way around. The core principle in this country is you're innocent until proven guilty. But now there appears to be this, and it may be influenced by the Me Too movement, is that if you're accused, you're guilty, and then you have to prove yourself innocent.
But Rod,
that's in a
court of law. That is not when you're hiring someone for the highest court in the land.
But this is still a critical point. I mean, you have to understand this is a core basic, okay?
So if you're hiring someone and somebody tells you that they've done something terrible, you don't take that into account when you're hiring them or somebody else?
Well, you take it into account, but
you do. Okay.
In this situation, though, I mean, give the guy a chance. And I think what has happened in this case, and we've seen it now, the latest demands are way out of line from her. I mean, she is pushing.
Like what kinds of things are you referring to?
Well, she's saying, well, he goes first, not me. I don't want him in the room when I testify. I only want to be questioned by these people. So she is setting the conditions on this hearing. That's never been done.
Which she needs to set some conditions because she's putting herself out there.
She has set conditions.
She's having death threats in her home and her family had to move out. She put herself out there.
But so isn't Brett Kavanaugh's family.
Most definitely. Those poor young daughters of his not even able to go to the confirmation hearing because it's such an interesting situation. But she needs to be heard, whether or not it's true or not. And while I do agree with what you're saying, she needs to be heard. She needs to say what's going on, and we need to get down to the bottom of the truth. He will be highest court of the land. We need to know whether or not there is a background if we're going to make this decision. And I think in the end, he'll still be confirmed, but she needs to be heard. We can't just read articles in the press. We need to be hearing what she has to say.
No one is saying she doesn't need to be heard. I think she needs to be heard as well. But do it, follow the process that's been followed in this country for years. Don't say in a trial, like you were bringing up, Max, in a trial. When does the prosecution ever go first in a trial?
So what kind of process do you Max?
You have got to,
How has it been done for years? Because we only have one precedent for something like this, and that's the Anita Hill hearing.
And it did not go very well.
The FBI did investigate, and they actually came out on the side of Clarence Thomas. Now, she's calling for the FBI to look into her. I don't know. I mean, that's not, you're not talking about saying, I want my best friend to investigate me.
Well, but let me go, the FBI thing. Why didn't Dianne Feinstein, call for an FBI investigation in July?
I agree.
All of a sudden, now we need an FBI
that.
investigation. Why didn't she call for it in July? That's so important.
So, Max, what do you think about that point? Because there was this call. Initially, she said this, Dr. Ford said, I want an investigation first from the FBI. We're not sure if that's happening or not. What do you think about that particular fact? And how does that really influence this entire discussion on process?
You know, I think it makes sense to have, first of all, we've got this deadline that's completely artificial. There's nothing in any law or rule that says that by this coming Monday, they have to confirm or not confirm a judge who's going to have a lifetime appointment to the highest court in the land. And so why are they pushing that deadline when they could actually have some people who are professional investigators look into this who might end up siding with Judge Kavanaugh? I agree. I'm sympathetic to him. I don't know who is telling the right, who is right or who is wrong, but I am worried that we have people jumping in and saying, oh, I absolutely believe him, or on the other side, I absolutely believe her, when they don't know both of them. And I think we need someone to really look into it.
And I agree with that. But this is a 36-year-old case. She says she can't remember the date. She didn't know where it took place, and she really doesn't know who was there other than maybe Brett Kavanaugh. How does
She doesn't say maybe Brett Kavanaugh. She doesn't say maybe on that one.
She doesn't even name him, does she?
I believe.
She says. I thought she said it's a guy who's a federal judge now.
She's named him now.
She's named him now. But the question is, how do you conduct an investigation where the evidence or what she is saying right now is very, very thin? No one has stepped up and said, yeah, I was there with her. The question, there's so many questions around this case. Was she drinking? Why did she go to the bedroom with Kavanaugh if that in fact took place? Those questions have to be answered.
She says she was pushed into the bedroom.
Yeah.
So,
but someone needs to ask these
so
questions.
Was she dragged upstairs?
And if someone asks these questions, then we can know this is what happened. And so even if you can't completely figure out, just asking the questions, having a conversation, having someone take the time to look at it, then you could say, okay, this is all we could determine. We don't know for sure if it happened, but here's what we know. Now make a decision. But we can't just be debating this in the press and different articles from different newspapers.
Emily, how do you think our elected officials should approach this? Because we even had Senator Orrin Hatch said, I think she might be mistaken. That was his statement recently.
He actually said, I think she is mistaken. She's mixed up. He was emphatic about it.
Yeah, so he was pretty emphatic about it. And a couple of our other elected officials are kind of taking the stand. We should kind of just look at the process. But if you're an elected official, Emily, how do we really approach this? What should they do or what should they insist on so we can get to the bottom of it and so the Utahns can really answer these questions that you have just asked?
Well, everyone's being delicate. It's a very delicate situation. You mentioned the Me Too movement. This has set a standard. And whether this is completely in that or not, there's a new precedence, and you have to be careful in these situations. Senator Hatch may have been a little too aggressive, and there is the public opinion now maybe that he is too aggressive, but you also can't be too standoffish. You have to make a decision. And I think as you're watching our Utah lawmakers who are in Washington, they want the process to happen. They want the discussion to happen, but they're not saying anything too much either way, because this is a very sensitive topic now because of the situation, the day and age that we live in.
One final point here is President Trump finally weighed in today on this issue. Rod, what did he say, and why did he do it?
He shouldn't have gone there. I mean, just stay away from it. He basically comes out and says, these charges, you've got to pay attention to these charges. She's getting a little carried away here. If it was that serious, why didn't she go to the police when she was 15 years old? I think he should have stayed out of it. I think that was a mistake. They were fearing at the White House for several days that he was going to say something. Well, finally he did, and I'm not sure if he just grabbed the phone and said, I'm tweeting on this, because he has wanted to say something.
Well, and that, Rod, and I agree with you there. I'm guessing, I don't know, but I'm guessing women around the country are hearing him say that and thinking, really? Why didn't she go to police when she was 15 years old? That's how many women in the world have experienced something at that age and not gone to police? I imagine there are women watching the show right now who have experienced that. And so I wish he had not gone there.
Well, and I wish he wouldn't have, but with her, and the question I go back to is, did she not go to her parents first because she was embarrassed that she was at the party to begin with? I mean, these are questions that need to be asked about her, and this is why we need a hearing on it.
Or at least to hear from her. Even we could just hear from her.
Let's
at least hear from her and then hear from him. And he adamantly denies it from the very beginning that these came out. He has been very steadfast. This is not true. I was not there.
And speaking of Hatch, what he said the other day, that she may be mixed up or messed up, well, now you've got a story out there floating today that it could be a case of mistaken identity. And a gentleman who wrote that worked for Justice Scalia. He was a clerk for him, has laid out a very interesting case about mistaken identity out there. And some people are saying Hatch is the one who's pushing that story. So where this is all going, who knows? I
know, but we may have a chance to hear from her, as we understand. There may be a chance for that, so we watch that story closely. Another issue close to home that we're all watching closely is medicinal marijuana. So I want to talk about some developments this past week here in Utah that may have some implications. One, the LDS Church coming out saying that they would like to see a special session called by our legislature before the end of the year. Max, what kind of deal is that? Is that huge that they're asking? Give us some implications.
You know what? The LDS Church asks for something. Categorically, that's huge. I mean, it is just that's the most influential institution in the state, bar none, bar the state government or anything else. And so, yes, that is huge. Now, what effect it's having? I guess the other huge side of this story is it bumped the polls a little bit as we see the before and after polls in terms of the church's stance on medical marijuana, but just by between maybe 5 and 10%, where it was supported by between 70 and 80% of the population. Now it's in the mid-60s. It's going to be really interesting to watch that play out.
I think we should talk about these polls for just a moment because many are watching, and the results of a poll entirely depends on the question that's asked, right? Yeah. So I think we should talk about the three big questions that are going out there for just a minute to get a flavor from Utahns generally. Emily, let's give the first one here. It's one that we did, that we've talked about on the show before through the Hinckley and the Tribune. The question was, do you support or oppose a proposed ballot initiative that would legalize marijuana use for people with serious medical conditions? Language of the initiative people are voting on. 67% of Utahns supported, 29 opposed, 4% don't know. That is an interesting number right there, 67%. So this is a couple months ago, but that is the initiative itself. What do we think about that number in terms of your discussions with Utahns? 67, was that a high number? Do you think that can hold?
I think that it might even be higher in reality, because when you talk about this, especially as you're talking about medicinal marijuana, and the advocates for it are showing young children having seizures. You have people who are grown-ups who are having other medicinal or other problems that they're dealing with, and they take this marijuana and they're fine. So I think on the surface, you look at it as, well, why wouldn't we want this to be happening? And I think the question, how it is set up right now, is of course I support people being healthy and having the access to it. But the problem with maybe that question, with all due respect to your poll, and as you look a little bit closer into it, is do you support medicinal marijuana? Yes, but do you support how it is at this point and how it's being presented in this initiative? That's the question that I think is getting a little bit closer and a little bit deeper as we get closer to the November election is, yes, I love medicinal marijuana. I'd like that to happen, but maybe not the way that it's being proposed right now.
Which is exactly the question that came out from those various stakeholders in the state, right? Where you can be supportive of medicinal marijuana and not supportive of the initiative itself, which leads to question number 2, a recent Utah policy poll. The question was this. This is for you, okay, Rod. Do you support or oppose legalizing doctor-recommended use of marijuana for certain diseases and pain relief? That's a variation of that first question. 64% support, 33 oppose, only 2% don't know. So this gets to the doctor-recommended use for pain, to Emily's very good point.
Well, that's the key point of the question. Doctor recommended. And I think there are a lot of people, to Emily's point, I think the general feeling is we want to help people in pain. And I don't think, it's hard to find anybody who would argue against that. It is the process of helping them to relieve that pain. And that's the key question here. Does it go through the doctors, the recommendation? You've got to deal with the FDA on all of this, and the Food and Drug Administration, and the stage 1 issue with the Schedule 1 issue with the drug, or do you allow individuals have dispensaries and to be able to do it themselves? So the doctor recommended is, I think, a key point being asked in that question.
Yeah, a very interesting variation of a poll question right there.
Key point, because you have states like Louisiana where a pharmacist is involved, but kind of at an arm's length, and so that's where you've got to decide.
And if I could bring up something, another dynamic that's at play here is that I don't think that people necessarily trust the legislature to do anything about this because
they haven't.
Because it has been in the discussion for a decade, and every year, we go up to the Hill and we hear this debate, and then nothing happens, or what happens is so incremental that it doesn't actually get to the problems that everyone acknowledges exist. And so at that point, how seriously do you take an offer of going to a special session or anything else? And I think we're seeing this in a number of our initiatives, a number of our election issues this year, whether it's that or whether it's people saying we support, I'd pay more taxes to support schools, and so, well, that never happens, and so let's just take it to the voters. Or, hey, I think we should have health care for the poor, and the polls overwhelmingly say people want to expand Medicaid, but that doesn't happen in the legislature. So we're seeing that in these initiatives. It's a fascinating year for that. That
is so true. So let's talk about what happens with the legislature, though, right? So let's just say the special session is called after the November vote. If the vote is close, if it's still in these margins, 50 to 60%, maybe a little higher than that, Emily, are legislators going to feel compelled to?
I sure hope so, because you've heard what the people have to say. They would like this to happen. Now it's your job. We elected you. You're up there at Capitol Hill to make this happen. So enough of this. As Max mentioned, we've been talking about this for forever, it feels like. So now let's do something.
It's going to be interesting to see, and you brought up this point, it's the margin of victory. If Prop 2 has a huge margin of victory, lawmakers are going to be, I think, a little reluctant to tweak with it too much. If it's fairly close, they may say, okay, people are divided here, we are going to tweak it, and we think we can get away with a little bit of this stuff. It's really going to be interesting what lawmakers are willing to do with Prop 2 if in fact it passes.
One more question to that point right there was also a Utah policy poll that I just want to ask you about, because it was what kind of impact is the LDS Church's statement having on this issue. The question was, leaders of the LDS Church have come out against the medical marijuana ballot initiative. Does their opposition make it more or less likely that you will vote for the initiative? Very interesting question, and here was the answer. 43% said they were less likely to support it, 41% more likely, 17% don't know.
That is a fascinating dynamic. I mean, the thing that really surprises me in that is the 41% less likely. That really surprises me that people say they may change their mind in the affirmative for the proposition because the LDS Church opposes it.
I asked church members on this as well, and I had several of them say to me, "My decision's been made. The church says no, I'm going to vote no."
But then you have the flip side, people saying,
Yep.
well, if the church tells me to vote no, I'm going to definitely vote yes. So I think you've kind of got both sides of the spectrum. Them coming out and saying what they had to say is a double-edged sword, I think.
The recent history that I think about in Utah is when we had the 2010 Bob Bennett losing his position after an uprising from the grassroots of the Republican Party. The next time, Orrin Hatch is up for election, and the LDS Church very very actively, I should say, encourages just the broad base of their membership to go to their caucuses. And boy, the convention, Orrin Hatch's convention was very different from Bob Bennett's convention.
Well, I think Orrin Hatch saw what happened to Bob Bennett.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he worked very hard to get there.
We're going to do this because you went to those caucus meetings.
Yeah.
There were Hatch supporters all over the place
at
those caucus neighborhood meetings.
It's true. I want to talk about the implication of this marijuana initiative on our races a little bit, because I want to get to this 4th Congressional District with Mia Love, Ben McAdams. I want to talk about the race, but let's talk about the kind of the marijuana part. Ben McAdams came out and said he supports. Mia Love is we will see.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess we'll see on that one. But it leads to what's happening in that particular election right now. So, Max, commercials maybe went a little negative this week.
Very.
What happened?
The commercials became, and you know who's going negative is the incumbent who's in the lead. And that's the surprising thing. I mean, clearly there's some worry there, even though they speak very confidently when you talk to the campaign and say, well, there's not going to be as much of a blue wave, a Democratic wave here in Utah. But man, they decided they were going to go after Ben McAdams.
I think what's going to be real interesting in that race is the effects of the medical marijuana initiative on this. I mean, if you've got people who really turn out because they're passionate about Prop 2,
They're going to vote for Ben.
Are they going to vote for Ben, or are they going to vote for me? Right now, because he's come out and said I'm in favor of it, does that mean they're going to vote for Ben? So I think that's going to kind of be over all the elections this
The
year.
turnout may be driven by a couple of these
Turnout may be
key
driven
questions.
by that and the Our Schools Now initiative and other initiatives as well.
Emily, what kind of impact has this kind of this question from the FEC this week about whether or not Mia Love should have been raising money for a primary when she probably knew she wasn't going to have a primary? What kind of impact is that having right now on the people you're talking to?
I don't think, not so great. I think Mia Love has been in Washington doing her thing. She doesn't come off as maybe the most pleasant. She's lovely. She's a lovely person. I met her many times. But when you see her in action, she's kind of buckled down. We're going to get to work. You see Ben McAdams. He's your guy next door. Lovely man taking a shower in one of his commercials. And then you hear about Mia Love maybe not doing things correctly with her campaigning. And I don't think it's very positive to be hearing that. More negative when it comes to Mia Love. And just as you mentioned, there must be some concern because you've got the ads fighting Ben McAdams and his shower shot there in one of his commercials. But things just are stacking up against Mia Love. She is not having a lot of positives.
You know, I've done story after story about campaign finance and the issues here in Utah and federally for years and years and years. And one thing I've learned in that time is that people don't care a lot.
Yeah.
They don't care about the financing, but we're talking about her negatively, and that's something that adds up.
I think a lot of people, Max, think politics is dirty to begin with.
Yeah.
They all get money under the table. And you're right, I don't think they care.
I think the bigger impact might be that they think, wait a minute, if that's how they run a campaign, you know, that they're because their story is, we just put it in this pot. We were just mistaken, and it was we should have set a Google alert to stop putting things in this pot after the convention.
And you look,
and
you
maybe,
look at the rules on election laws and fundraising. They're all over the place. You talk to staffers of every one of these members of this congressional delegation, and they're going to say they're all over the place. We don't know what we can do.
Either.
No teeth.
Yeah.
Well, because they're not doing anything about it. They're just
They aren't doing
talking
anything
about it.
So following up on this, the Alliance for Better Utah filed an official complaint this week also against the Love campaign, which they're trying to manage through talking about really explaining what the rules are. That was the problem, Rod, is the great points you've made is the eyes kind of glaze over about some of these regulations, but that's really the point right there, right?
Yeah. It really does, like Emily was saying, you know, it raises doubts about Mia Love a little bit in some people's mind. They hear she violated rules. You know, does it cause them problems? It may cause her a few problems, but I'm with Max. I think for the most part, people look at it, eyes glaze over.
It could be, the more significant thing could be that it's going to cost her a whole lot of money. Because the money that's in question, if the FEC does decide to make a decision, which sometimes they don't for years, but sometimes they do. And we're talking about $372,000 in this, that's part of this portion of money that was given and put into this primary election pot when she didn't have a primary election. And so if the FEC comes along and says, sorry, but that money is not yours anymore. You can't spend that money. That could be a decisive thing.
It's a chunk of change.
It is indeed. Let's talk about money for a little moment more, because Emily, you did some great reporting on this, and Fox did also on school fees. All right, we have actually a court decision that talks about the kind of fees that can and can't be assessed, and how much that keeps people from participating in extracurricular activities. Will you talk about that audit a little bit and what the results were?
They did an audit, and they checked to make sure that every child, whether they come from a household with a lot of money or if they don't, they should have the same opportunities to participate in extracurricular activities. Great idea, making sure everyone's taken care of. They looked into it, and unfortunately, that's not being honored or happening as it should be, and some kids are missing out on opportunities because it's just so darn expensive to do things in school. And so they came very vocal about the audit, and changes are being made. I'm hearing of, in the Canyon School District, some of their groups in different high schools not going on a trip this fall because the audit came through, it's not being done correctly, and they've got to reel it in just a little bit to make sure it's fair and equal for everyone, which I think is great.
Yeah, it has gotten out of control. As the audit report, $2,500 to be on a cheerleading squad.
That's being fair. Yeah. That's being very generous. That number is usually higher.
Are you kidding me? And I spoke with Elisa Ellis, who's on the board. They had already seen this coming. They were starting their own internal audit as to what's going on here, and she admitted everybody agrees something's got to be done about this. It's nuts.
How did we get to a point where it seems like it's got to be a part of cheerleading or band or football or whatever debate that you got to go on a big trip? And you got to have 20 uniforms, and you got to have, you know, this many outfits, and you've got to go to this many camps. It's absurd.
Well,
we're putting so much on these kids, too.
It's the competition of it all. We want our kids to be the best. And in order to be the best, you got to go to those camps because the other high school's doing it too.
To be the best what? I mean, honestly, cheerleading's for fun. It's for, you know, it's you love to dance and you want to cheer and boom. But otherwise, you know, it's not, you're not going to be 40 years old in cheerleading.
We hope you're not.
And the key is the transparency here. A lot of parents are blindsided by these fees as they sign their kids up. And you've got to be upfront with people and say, this is what it's going to cost.
It's heartbreaking. You think about what a parent goes through.
And what Emily just pointed out, you may have a fee, but there's so many other amounts of money stacked onto
Well,
this
and it's
thing.
important to note that if a child wants to participate, they can always participate. If a fee cannot be met, the district, the school will be helping to make sure you can participate. So at the end of the day, everyone will have an opportunity to do what they want to do.
It's key.
But we need to rein it in, and we need to make sure that we are being responsible.
And thank goodness my kids got my clumsy, unathletic genes, and so this is not an
You don't have to worry about it.
No
Good.
problem.
The Roth family is going to be okay with this. Our legislature, however, though, Emily, a final note on this is saying that they may decide to jump into this particular.
Yeah, they might. And that would be interesting to see. I think that the school districts and the school board being very vocal, as we're seeing, saying, hey, we got this. We're going to get things under control. And I think part of the reason they're doing that is they don't want anyone else stepping in to try to take care of this. So being very vocal, we heard you, audit is right. We see we got a problem. We're going to try and fix things up.
Very good. Going to have to be the last point on that. Thank you for your great insights this evening.
Thanks, Jason.
That's it for this edition of the Hinckley Report. For more discussion, follow us online at kued.org/Hinckley Report. Thank you and good night.